Joe, this book is coming out at the absolute prime time. I mean, I have learned so much in your pages, and then I step back and look at what's going on in the world right now. Joe, this is perfect.
Well, I appreciate that. It was a while in the works, as you can imagine, from reading it. But I'm very lucky that it was scheduled for publication at the time that it was. I owe that to my publisher.
Wow. What I love about the book is everything that I learned becoming a third-degree black belt in martial arts. It was not about the present. It was about knowing where everything comes from. And that's what you're doing with this book, The Longest Con, is that, hey, there is a story that has led us to our...
That's exactly right, Arrow. I mean, when you look at the condition of our politics today, it's fair for people to ask, how did we get here? Yeah. Especially young people. I have two 17-year-olds, and they're like, how did this happen, Dad? And so, you have to go back a ways, and you have to look at how things started to deteriorate, at least on the right, over time. And it's a fascinating story with a lot of characters and personalities, and a tremendous amount of intrigue and immorality, I guess you could say. But I have to say, I did also, Arrow, try to make it funny. I think when there's always an inherent humor in people getting swindled, and how people are fooled and tricked, and there's quite a bit of that here in our history.
I got to tell you, when I was reading the book, I'm glad you brought up the funny part, because I reacted in so many ways, not in words, but in sounds I was making. And I would love to watch what other readers are doing as well when they come across one of those points, and because they're going to react somehow, some way.
Yeah, so there are people who find the whole thing very depressing, and I don't blame them for that. But I really, knowing that was going to be the reaction that some people would have, I tried very hard to look at what made some of this comical, and what made it humorous, and what made it just gripping and interesting as this developed, is this increasing and metastasizing panorama of scams, cons, ripoffs that developed to the point where now the conservative movement kind of no longer exists, and it's dominated by Trump, who is one of the biggest con men of all time.
Yeah. And it even goes back before that, because you introduce us to this gentleman by the name of Roy Cohn. I had no idea. I don't even know who this guy is, but in this book, you show him.
Oh, yes. So Roy Cohn was Trump's mentor. I mean, back when Trump first came into public consciousness in the 70s, Roy Cohn was a very disreputable lawyer. He had worked for Senator McCarthy in the Senate, and made a name for himself there as kind of an unscrupulous character. He got McCarthy in trouble and brought an end to that investigation with his own bad behavior. But he returned to New York, where he had political connections, and became a powerful lawyer who represented the Trump family. And he became very close to Donald Trump, who took on a lot of Roy's characteristics of dishonesty, not paying his taxes, not paying people who worked for him, basically, using every foul means to get his way. And, there's a famous moment in the White House during Trump's term as president, when he screamed at some of his lawyers, "Where's my Roy Cohn?" Yeah, yep. Because he wanted somebody who would behave that way. He needed that to defend him and to advance his interests. And so that's why I went back. It was kind of a conceit to begin the book there. Cons and scams have existed in our history for forever, but I thought, let's start with Roy Cohn and his story, because that tells us so much about how we got to where we are today.
Oh my God. The foreword of the book. I think that people need to read it not once, but I would love for them to write something down after they experience it, go read it again, write about it, because there's so much in that foreword that we need to learn before we step into the pages.
Well, I was very fortunate that my friend George Conway, who is a real conservative, agreed to write the foreword to my book. He read the book. He really liked it. He understands why it's important for conservatives, above all, to understand what has happened to their movement. And he wrote a terrific foreword. I totally agree.
Wow. You got to be going crazy nowadays, but in the way that what we've experienced over the past couple of weeks, it's almost like a reality TV show, and I want a television break. I need to have some commercials here to separate this, but somebody...
Nobody would believe this plot, would they?
No, they would not. But that's what's so interesting about what you do, is that I want to hear how you are interpreting everything that's going on, because you've given us the history, but here we are.
Well, I think at the end, the President Biden realized that there was an enormous threat looming over the country, and that he was not, for whatever reason, able to resist it by himself as the president, as the Democratic nominee, and finally decided, under some pressure, but I think partly out of his own patriotism, to step aside and let the Democrats have a different kind of chance to oppose Trump and Trumpism. And, let's see how it works out. The party seems to be lining up behind the vice president. Yeah. And we'll see how she does, Yeah. It's a lot at stake there.
I mean, the title of the book itself, and then when you jump into the book, but the longest con, how grifters, swindlers, and frauds hijacked American conservatism. The thing is that if I would not have read this book last week, if I would not have been there and experienced it, everything that's unfolding, even with Ted Manchin and things like that, I'm sitting here going, which one of these guys is lying? What is going on here? Because I see it on this page, and now I'm seeing it in real life. I mean, you're opening up our hearts here, Joe.
Well, I would like it if that's what happened, Arrow, because it's important for people to pay attention in America, just like we need honest progressives and centrists. We need the full spectrum, and they have to be operating in what they believe is the best interest of the country, and not simply serving themselves and trying to rip off people. And, so I exposed at least the one side of this, which I think is very dominant now in the Republican Party and conservatism. And, I hope people will take it seriously, especially people who consider themselves conservative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems to be a label, but are you living that label? Are you activating it?
That's right. Conservatism once had a reputation in this country for, I would say, civic virtue and, moral hygiene, you could say. And that's pretty much gone now. I mean, you look at the Republican Party, that's not what you really see if you look at it honestly. And it would be great if it could come back to what it once was, and I try to explain some of that in the book. I try to examine how it deteriorated, and especially the state that it's in now, with a con man like Trump in charge and really as almost dictating what happens on the right. That is something that I think people across the spectrum need to grapple with.
Don't you think you're reintroducing us to the definition of conservatism? So many people, if you bring up conservative to anybody, they're going to go, oh, I'm not conservative. I do this, I do this, I do this. And I'm going, I don't think you understand the word. I don't think you understand the movement. And I just think that your book reintroduces us to what it is.
Well, that's part of the reason why I wrote the book is that, when you look at the decline of conservatism in the last, let's say, 10 years, that is an important problem, and it's become a sort of haven for conspiracy theories and all kinds of craziness, violence, and this is not what conservatism has ever meant in our country. And for conservatives to confront that would be a very healthy development in our society.
Did you run into any big walls or closed doors? Because when you start digging like this and you start unveiling the truth, there's got to be some people that were knocking on your door going, Joe, are you sure? This book is based on really careful research, I will say. And I was, every one of my books, Arrow, has been vetted by attorneys. That's part of the deal when you do investigative journalism. And this book had the shortest legal review I've ever had. Wow.
A very good lawyer. I know he was thorough. I know he read the book because we went through it together. But it was pretty fast. And he said, the reason is that you disclose the sources, what you're talking about, and how you found out on every page of this book. And that is what I tried to do.
I had an 8th grade teacher that used to tell us all the time. He says that watch what's going on with these elections because those who support the candidate that wins get the superhighways going through their states. And man, that opened up my eyes. And a book like what you've got here is pretty much what Mr. Fox was saying. Open up your eyes.
Yes, well, what your 8th grade teacher explained to you is a relatively harmless version of how politics works. Yeah. It's that's how we've done things traditionally in this country, and for the most part, that worked out okay. This is about something else. This is about how conservatives, or so-called conservatives, have scammed their own people for many years now, ripped off millions of people, many of whom could ill afford it, from by deceiving them. And there's a favorite slogan on the right: "Own the libs," and it means that somehow you are stomping on liberals. But in fact, the people that they're harming in most of these scams, or really all of them, are their own people. And that is why I wish that conservatives would read this book. I think it would open up their eyes and let them understand that they've been led in the wrong direction, and that they're being ripped off.
Well, you bring up something very interesting here. Let us pray, not P-R-A-Y, P-R-E-Y. And I mean, I was like, whoa, that's some openness there.
Yes. Well, so that for a long time, the right has been dominated really by the conservatives. I think everybody knows that. And the problem with that is that there's a big element in that religious movement of grifters and scammers and con artists who've gotten very wealthy, millions and millions of dollars from their own parishioners, the people in their churches, the people who listen to them on the radio or on TV, sending in money in the kind of, I would say, hopeless belief that if they give money to these preachers, they themselves will become wealthy, or their illnesses will be cured, or their other problems will be solved. And, it's not just a ripoff. It's, in my view, it's a blasphemy. And one of the people I quote in the book about that is none other than Jerry Falwell himself, who said that what they call the prosperity gospel is one of the worst heresies of our time. And yet that is who is now dominating Arrow. Those are the people around Donald Trump, his favorite preachers, Paula White and others who you can find online, are prosperity gospel ministers who have reaped millions of dollars in what I think is, a pretty obvious contradiction of what the Bible tells us about getting through the eye of a needle and all the rest of it. It's not what biblical morality is really supposed to be. So I think that's that part of the book is actually both sad and funny. You find, it's ludicrous what people will believe.
Well, you gave me two different points of view on when it comes to the world of religion getting involved with politics and things, is because I did want to come on here and say, do the cons have a king? But then when you bring up the world of religion, well, that king is the king that they're talking about, which is God. And so now I'm sitting here on both sides of the fence going, oh my God, in which direction do I travel? I mean, I realize I come from a religious world, but my preacher isn't like those that are, that are tapping into Donald Trump.
Yeah, if people tell you that God insists that you send them money, you might want to check for your wallet. Like that's I think that's a fairly obvious sign that something's wrong.
You say something inside the book that I haven't heard in a very long time. This stuff fell off the page 6 of the newspaper and even on the social media. Tea Party. Wow. A lot of us do not even know what the story is behind that. And those of us that do know it, we didn't understand most of it.
Yeah, I think that's an important chapter of the book, Arrow, because it's when we first saw Donald Trump become a serious potential president or presidential candidate. The rise of the Tea Party. And unfortunately, as I outline in the book, behind the sort of, rah-rah spirit, and this is, the spirit of 1776, was just a garden variety series of cons and scams where they were fighting with each other, the various Tea Party groups, over who was going to reap the most money. And, flash forward, Donald Trump became an important figure in the Tea Party movement by claiming that President Obama had been born in Kenya, which was a claim he later had to withdraw, of course. But when Sarah Palin, who you may recall ran for vice president in 2008, when she sort of moved aside after running her own grift, Trump became the face of the Tea Party movement, and it's how he rose to prominence in the Republican Party.
It's like somebody in Hollywood is writing this book, and we're all the actors out here receiving this entertainment. I mean, even if it's gloomy and dark and sad, it's still entertaining to stand back here and watch everything that's unfolding.
Well, I appreciate that. I tried to make it as gripping and entertaining as possible. One of the things I do when I'm writing a book is I follow what's called the Elmore Leonard rule. I don't know if your listeners read Elmore Leonard's wonderful novels, but he said, the thing you need to do is leave out the parts that people skip over. And that's what I try to do when I write a book now. So I hope people find it entertaining.
Well, I would love to see the eyes that land on that chapter about Richard Nixon, because, once again, I mean, right there is a con artist. A lot of people have written it off, walked away from it, don't want to deal with it, but you're talking about it.
Well, I think, understanding our history, as you said before, is really an important part of how we deal with the political situation we're in now. And Nixon is certainly a part of this. The people around Trump, many of them had their start in that era. Yep. Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, they all come out of that era of politics. And, Roger Stone, who, your listeners may or may not know of, is very, very close to Trump. He was the one who first said that Trump should run for president, political consultant. He was investigated by the Senate Watergate Committee way back then because he was then a young, dirty trickster. He had dropped out of college and gone to work in the Nixon campaign. And this guy, I don't know if you know this or have ever heard this, he has Nixon's image tattooed between his shoulders. Oh. So and that's deep, right? That's how far it goes.
Wow. I talked with him, and that was one of the toughest conversations because, of everything that we've ever read about him, been through and things like that. And it was so hard to have that conversation because I just wanted to dig in, but don't dig in too deeply.
Yeah, well, you can dig in my book. It's all there and more.
Now, is it on Audible? Because the one thing that I'm learning from readers is that they're in the car and they want to listen to it. And so I'm going, okay, as long as you digest the book. So are you putting it on Audible?
If folks go to Amazon for The Longest Con, they will find that it's available on recording, yes, and in Kindle. It's in all available in all modes. Wow. So yes, we listen to books in the car all the time, and I know that lots of people do that, and I would encourage them. I didn't read this one myself. They hired a very good reader to do it, so I think it sounds great, and people should. That'd be a great way to pick up what's in the book and absorb it.
But the great news is, though, Joe, is that you showed up and had conversations today so that people can read it or listen to it, and they get to hear your inflection when they come to a show like this, and they can hear the passion and that inflection that you are putting inside the reasons why you did this book.
Well, I appreciate that. And I would also mention, if people would like a sample of the book, I published my introduction on my website, which is called nationalmemo.com, one word. You can find the introduction to the book there and read it and see if it interests you. Also, my friend George Conway put his foreword up on Twitter, so you can read that too. So you get a couple of pieces of the book for free, and then see if you want to dive into the rest of it.
See, I love listening to George. I love me some George. I'm going to tell you that right now. You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Will you be brilliant today, okay, Joe?
Do my best. Thanks, man.